one time or another, we've all played this little game. Well, if you could have one thing, if you were stranded on a deserted island, what one thing would you want to have with you? And as you think about that question, you realize, well, what is that one thing supposed to do? If that one thing was for me to survive on this island, I might want a flint so I could start fire, or maybe a machete so I can, do something, so I'm thinking of a survival item. But what if that one item was for you to get rescued? Well, I might want a radio, I might want a flare gun, but what if that one item was something to help you pass the time away while you're on this deserted island? Then you might want a book of Sudoku puzzles, to give you something to do so, you won't be bored. Or you might think, well, if I could have cable TV, I don't think that's an option, but you think, well, maybe it's just something to keep me busy. And then you may say, well, maybe it's the one thing I just can't live without. I would just have to have this one possession means the world to me. If I could have this one thing, I really don't care if I'm on a deserted island or not. But it makes you think. There's another kind of little riddle like this. It's a little darker, but it's the phrase, if your house was on fire. And let me put the little caveat here. Everybody's safe. Because normally we say, well, I want to get my loved ones out. But your loved ones are out, your pets are out, the goldfish is out, everybody's good, okay? But what would be that one thing you'd want to grab on the way out? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you think. But the objective of the exercise is to say, we've got a lot of stuff. We've got a lot of things, and so you start thinking about, what would I have to hang on to? The reality is, in the midst of tragedy, value points change. Things that you just bought, oh man, I gotta have this. This is just the best. I've waited and waited. I've gotta have this. Now, if some of your house is on fire, it's like, let that burn. I've got to get this. So things change. And so Jesus is kind of bringing this story to us of the one thing. And Jesus takes us on a serendipitous story. Serendipity is a great word. It's fun to say. And serendipity simply means an unexpected discovery. Now, we have all had serendipitous moments in our life. Have you ever put on a pair of pants and you put your hand in your pocket and you pull out a $20 bill? That's serendipity. Have you ever lost the TV remote and you're rummaging in the couch cushions? Can't find the remote, but you find a lot of other stuff you've lost. That's serendipity. Now, if you pull out an old crusty slice of pizza, that just means you have kids, okay? That's not serendipity, that's just kids that lose pizza, that's all it is. So Jesus tells this serendipitous story, and briefly it's the hero of the story is a man who's working in a field or going through a field. He doesn't own the field, and he's doing something in the field. Jesus never says what. And when he's going through this field, he unexpectedly finds this treasure. And this treasure has great value, enough so that he sells everything he has so that he can buy this field so that he can own the treasure. Let's listen to the words that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. It's just one verse. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovered hidden in a field. In his excitement, he hid it again and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field. Now I want to unpack this verse. This verse has only 36 words, but it leaves me with all sorts of questions. I don't know about you, but inquiring minds want to know. And so here's the questions I have. They may be your questions too. What was this man doing in the field? Was he working? Was he plowing? Was he told to do something? Was he just passing through? Was it a shortcut? Was he on a path? What was this man doing? How did he find this treasure? You know, was he plowing and it kind of unearthed, or was it like half buried and he tripped over it? How did he find the treasure? What type of treasure was it? You know, was it like a pirate's chest with gold and rubies in it? Or was it just something that was just really precious in itself? How deep was the treasure? I mean, did he have to, you know, go home and get shovels and pickaxes and a backhoe and get this thing out? And then, who put the treasure there in the first place? I mean, because it doesn't sound like it was natural. It wasn't like he struck oil. So it's like someone had to put it there. Who put it there? Now, you may not have those questions, but I do. And the interesting thing is, Jesus did not provide the answers to these questions, because those answers, those questions, really don't answer the question that Jesus is doing for us here. If we knew the man's name and knew the exact field location and knew what the treasure was, Jesus said, you're missing the point. The important part of the story, that the man found something he wasn't necessarily looking for and was willing to give all he had to obtain it. That's what Jesus is talking about. Now, when we first read this story, I think all of us have some ethical questions about it. We're wondering about, is what this man is doing, is it really on the up and up? He's in somebody else's field, finds somebody else's treasure, and then he buys it so that he can buy this field. And so, you know, is it really legal? Is it really the right thing for this guy to do? Well, first question we want to ask is, who owned the treasure? Well, whoever put the treasure in there was the person who owned the treasure. And apparently, from what Jesus tells us, that guy's not in the picture. Because when the guy goes to the owner of the land and says, I want to buy this field, the man who owns the field now probably is not aware that treasure's in there, because the price was affordable. If he knew there was this big, vast treasure, I think the price would have went up. Because, you know, if you want this land and you want that treasure, you're going to pay more for that. So the original person who buried the treasure is probably out of the equation, and the person who has the land doesn't know what's there. And so is this man taking advantage of anybody? Well, let me put it in a modern context for you. Let's say you went to a yard sale and you found object number one here, a mirror. This mirror was at a yard sale. The owner of the yard sale said, I want $2 for it. So someone paid $2, took it home, did a little research, turned out it was made by the Tiffany Company in 1905, and he turned around and sold it for $35,000. Let me give you number two. This couple saw this painting, or this guy, saw these two little paintings, and he bought them for $35. It turns out they were John F. Kensett paintings, and he sold them for $100,000. Next one. You got another one?
Next one.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you need to.
This woman liked an old frame, old picture frame. She talked the person down to $2.48 for the frame. She didn't care about the picture, she just wanted the frame. Got home, took it apart, found behind the picture I want to make sure I get the year right, an 1820 copy of the Declaration of Independence. She sold it for $477,000. And the last one, guy bought this table, paid $25 for it. He was cleaning it, and on the inside he found a label. So he did a little internet search, found out that this table is a Seymour card table. He took it to auction and it sold for $1 million. All right, so here's my ethical question. Same kind of premise of the man in the field. Did these people need to go back to the yard sale owner and say, look, you sold this to me for a couple bucks, and it turns out it's worth this. I feel like I owe you some money. Would you do that? Well, while you're thinking about it, I'll go on. I think for the most part we'd say, look, you wanted $5 for it. I gave you $5 for it. And we kind of feel like you put it on the table. I didn't price it. You priced it. I gave you what you asked for it. I did the homework. I found out what its true value was. I made a lot of profit on it. And so that's my benefit. Well, here's what the religious leaders in Jesus' time said. They said, finders keepers. They said, you know, if you are the one who finds it, you're the one who keeps it. And during the time of Jesus, it was very typical for people to bury things in the ground to protect things of value. You think about it, Israel, they didn't have banks, there were no investment companies, there were no safety deposit boxes, and for hundreds of years, different armies would come through and try to invade them, and they would go to your house and they would take your valuables. It was the Assyrians, it was the Babylonians, it was the Greeks, and now it was the Romans. And so even if you wanted to take a trip, you might say, instead of leaving this in the house where people come in and take it, I'm going to put it in the backyard and bury it so that when I come home, I'm going to know where it is. Remember, Jesus tells a story like this. He tells a story of a man giving money to 3 of his servants to invest while he's gone. 2 of them do that. 1 buries it in the backyard. In Matthew 25:18 it says, but the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. Now I think there's some downsides to putting your valuables in the ground. If you're the only one that knows it's there and you're not in the picture anymore, it's gone. Now, I think the bigger thing is I could bury it in my backyard and then forget where I put it. You know, and I could have my whole backyard tore up looking for it and never find it because I really hit it good on me. I can do that in the house. I don't have to bury anything in my backyard. But I'm going to put this up for safekeeping, and it's safe even for me because I don't know where I kept it. And so there was a lot of people putting valuable things in the ground. And we're not sure if this man was plowing or digging or walking through the field. But it tells us that it didn't belong to him. But the common law at the time said if you find it, it's yours. Finders, keepers. And so the group, the audience that Jesus was sharing this parable to, would not have the ethical questions you and I would raise. They would say, hey, cool, wish that was me. I'd never go through a field and find anything. So they didn't have any kind of value attachment about to whom did this belong. But maybe it's just me, but I kind of get hung up on all the wrong questions. The questions that I'm asking, Jesus says, you don't need those answers because it's not pertinent to the story. I think the one big question I have is what in the world did this guy find? What was it? What was it that he was willing to sell everything he had so that he could have this one thing? And Jesus really doesn't care what the treasure was. Jesus is answering this one question. He's answering the question, what is the kingdom of heaven like? And Jesus says it's like this. It's like, he says the short answer Jesus gives is that the kingdom of heaven is worth more than everything else a person could possibly own. And that it's worth possessing even if it meant you had nothing else to your name. He said that's how valuable it is. The kingdom of heaven is so valuable that you're willing to have it and be homeless, but you've got this one thing, and therefore it's worth everything. I think there's 4 things that Jesus tells us in this verse about the kingdom of heaven. First off, number 1, the treasure was there for whoever found it. Now you think about it. Jesus doesn't say anything about this man. He just said there was a man in the field. This is not a special man. There wasn't anything important about him. Jesus doesn't say this was an important person. He doesn't say this was a special guy. He doesn't say this was a worthy guy. He doesn't say this is a guy that had been down and out and really needed a good pick-me-up. He just says this is a guy. It's a regular person. And that's what the Bible says so often. It says, whosoever will. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be worthy. You don't have to be sacrificial. You don't have to do anything great and outstanding. You just have to be a person. Look at the people that Jesus called to be disciples. Regular people, just like us. Government workers, and fishermen, and accountants. They were just people. In Revelation 22:17, it says, come, let anyone who hears this say, come, let anyone who is thirsty come, let anyone who desires drink freely from the water of life. In the King James it says, whosoever will. Whosoever. Doesn't matter your nationality, doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter if you're worthy or you've deserved it. It's just whosoever. And that's what Jesus says about the treasure that is found. The kingdom of heaven is for whoever. Doesn't matter. No requirements. You just come. The second thing it tells us about this is the man was not looking for treasure. Nowhere in there does Jesus tell us that this man got up and said, today I am going to find treasure. No. In fact, it's the opposite. He says this man was in the field. Maybe he was working for somebody. Maybe he was plowing it or reaping it, or maybe he was just passing through it. But he didn't wake up with a quest to find treasure. And when you think about it, nobody really gets up in this morning and says, I'm going to find God. There's not a lost person out there that says, today I'm going to discover where God is and make him a part of my life. Now there's people that have a hunger in them. The Holy Spirit's convicting them. The Holy Spirit's drawing them to himself. And there's feelings, there's questions that gnaw them. What is there after life? Or why do I feel empty inside? Or there's a void in me. And they're wondering, is there something more? But the good thing to know is that God is always looking for us. It tells us the Father is pursuing us. In Luke 19:10 it says, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. God cares about us. He's looking for us, even if we're not looking for him. The third thing that we see is the kingdom of heaven was hidden, but it could be found. It was hidden, but it could be found. The ringtone on my phone, if you've ever heard it go off, it's Indiana Jones. I like those kind of stories of looking for treasure and adventure. I watch TV shows like that. I watched the TV show of the Curse of Oak Island. I don't know if you guys watched that, but for like 150 years they've been looking for this treasure on Oak Island off of Nova Scotia, and literally hundreds of people, millions of dollars have been spent trying to find it, and it's got all these little traps and they can't get to the treasure. Kingdom of Heaven's not like that. It's not a riddle. It's not something we have to solve. It's not something we have to take our whole lives to figure out and unravel. God said it's a treasure, but he wants you to find it. It's not like you have to work hard to decipher it and you have to do something to figure it out. God says, here's my treasure. Whosoever wants it, you can find the treasure. You can have the treasure. The last thing we see from this verse is that the treasure's free. but it's not cheap. Somehow, in our mindset, we equate cheap with no value. John, you see this all the time. Where you work, people say, it don't mean anything to me anymore, here it is, throw it out. But it doesn't mean that everything that comes through there has no value. It just doesn't mean anything to them. But we look at the grace of God. And grace says, I will freely give you what you don't deserve. Well, let me tell you, my friends, it was not cheap. It cost Jesus his life to give us this treasure. And I think there's two sides of one coin. There's a balance we need to keep as we're presenting salvation to people and as we're looking at salvation for ourselves. Here's the first one. We simply believe. Simply believe. I never want to make the path to salvation more than it is. We were talking Wednesday night, somehow in being a church, being a denomination, we kind of make a few more rules about what it means to be a Christian than the Bible does. You know, as Baptists, we say, you know, you don't spit, you don't chew, you don't dance, and you don't go with girls who do, you know, that kind of thing. You know, the Bible doesn't say that. You know, those are probably good rules to remember, but, you know, the Bible simply says that we come with faith, believing in what Jesus Christ did on the cross, realizing that we're sinners and saying, I can't do anything about my sin problem. I need a Savior to redeem me from that, and that his blood's going to cover that. And when God judges me, he's going to see the blood of Christ and not my unrighteousness. He's going to see the righteousness of Christ. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. But there's more to that, isn't there?
Amen.
Isn't there more? If we just said, I'm a sinner and I want that, and then we run out the door, haven't we kind of undersold what Christianity is all about? Because it's also about having a new master. Jesus says, I want to be number one. I don't want to be number 37. I don't want to be number 24. I don't even want to be number 2. I want to be number 1. I want everything in your life to let me be number 1. Jesus said it like this. He said in Luke 16, he said, no one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money or mammon or the world, whichever. You know, let's be honest though, haven't we all at times thought we could serve both? We could get away with it. We could do it. We could make God happy and pursue what we want to do. The problem is we all get to a crunch time, a crisis, a place where we've really got a fork in the road and we've got to pick. Where do my loyalties lie? Is it going to be with God, or am I going to pick what I really, really want this over here? So where's my priority in this situation? Where am I going to give my time? Where am I going to give my money? When Jesus met with that rich young ruler, he was asking this young man, where do your priorities lie? Jesus knew, even before he began the conversation. This young man said, man, I've kept all the 10 Commandments. I am up and up. I am sure all the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, everybody said, man, you are a 4-star guy. You're the best. Drop some money in the offering plate on your way out. But Jesus said, you know, he talked to him in Matthew 19, verses 20 to 22. He said, this is the young man talking. He said, I've obeyed all these commandments. The young man replied, what else must I do? And Jesus told him, if you want to be perfect, go and sell all your possessions, give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. But when the young man heard this, he went away very sad, for he had many possessions. When confronted, the young man had to confess that he loved his stuff more than he loved God. Seems like what he owned really owned him. Jesus wasn't number one. I love stories about missionaries. I think they really show the best in Christianity. One of those was Jim Elliot. Jim Elliot was a young man who wanted to work with the native Indians in South America in the 1950s, and he flew down there with his wife and family, and he was a great journal writer, and he wrote in his journal, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep, and to gain what he cannot lose." He penned that just days before he was killed by the Indians. His wife miraculously stayed. Many of those in that tribe converted, and evangelism was alive and well in that part of the world. Over 100 years ago now, there was a brave group of young people coming out of colleges and seminaries, and they were known as the one-way missionaries. Now this concept, it's going to really change the way you think. They literally would buy a one-way ticket. And they were so committed to this one-way ticket, they didn't take suitcases, they didn't take trunk, they took one thing with them, they took a coffin. And in that coffin they placed everything that they thought they would need to do missionary work wherever in the world. And in their mind, and in their heart, they only needed a one-way ticket, because when they came home, they were going to be in that box. Or that box would be buried where they were. One of those persons was a man named A.W. Milan. And he decided to go to the New Hebrides, which was in the South Pacific. And what he knew about the place he was going was simply this, that every missionary who went died. And so A.W. packed all his stuff in his coffin. He said farewell to family and friends. I'm sure it was a tearful departure as they watched the ship sail away, knowing he would never see them again. Interesting enough, for 35 years, A.W. lived among that tribe. Why they didn't kill him, I don't know. But when he died, when they placed him in that casket that he brought with him, they buried him in the middle of town. And they put a marker up, and this is what the marker says. When he came, there was no light. When he left, there was no darkness. See, this is what Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is like. It's like a treasure that's worth everything. When did we start believing that God wants to send us to a safe place to do easy things? That playing it safe is safe. But Christianity is radical. Jesus didn't die so we could be safe. And faithfulness is not holding the fort, it's storming the gates of hell. The will of God is not an insurance plan to keep us safe and out of harm. It's a daring plan for us to evangelize the world. And so Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that you literally sell everything you have so that you could possess just this one thing. Here's my appeal. If you are not a Christian, I realize what the world tells us. because I hear the world too. The world tells us if you want to be living the right life, the full life, then you've got to be making a certain amount of money, and living in a certain kind of house, and driving a certain kind of car. But Jesus says if you're pursuing all of that, then what you're pursuing is going to leave you empty. That there's one treasure, and that's the kingdom of heaven. Now, for us who are saved, let me tell you, that world's message drums in our head. And you got to ask yourself, if I fervently pursue the cause of Christ, earnestly, every day, from the time I first accepted Christ to now, where would I be? I'd be further along than I am right now. Because self crept in the way, life crept in the way, different pursuits, different goals, different priorities. And you know, the reality is that's still going to be my life, because me keeps saying I want to do. And a lot of times me want to do is not what Jesus wants me to do. But Jesus says so easy in 36 words that the kingdom of heaven is such a great treasure, so valuable, that if that's all you had, it was more than enough. That's the way we all live. That's the way we all live. And so we have a time of commitment. I think every sermon deserves the opportunity for you to give a response. So how are you going to respond? Altar's available. I'm here. Stand as we sing.